Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk, this Monday edition of Focal Point on AFR Talk. We've got a lot of stuff that we are going to get to today. Barack Obama this morning had a press conference, and he and Rob, Jeff, let's grab audio clips 7 and 8. Barack Obama had a press conference today with David Cameron from the UK, and he touched on the subjects of this IRS. The IRS actually targeting conservative groups. We talked about this on Friday. I'm going to delve into a little bit more after we hear a couple of these sound bites. But it was very, very clear. This goes back to 2010. Now, some accounts were saying, well, this went back to the election year, 2012, and then other people discovered no, went back to 2011. Now we know that this harassing by the IRS of conservative organizations went back to 2010, and that people near the top of the IRS pyramid knew about this. I mean, what the IRS has been trying to do is pass this off on low-level flunkies in their Cleveland office who were kind of acting on their own and without authorization, and now we know, no, the knowledge, the awareness that this was going on went right to the top. Now, the groups that were targeted were groups that had the word Tea Party in them, groups that had the word patriot in them. Then they started going after any groups that were seeking to educate people about the Constitution. Now, this makes perfectly good sense to me that they would target groups that were trying to educate people about the Constitution because they want the American people to be as clueless about what's in the Constitution as they are. They do not want the American people to know more about the Constitution than they do. And that is a pretty low threshold to clear, frankly, ladies and gentlemen. So they went after these groups back in 2010. We even discovered that they went after pro-Israel groups. See if I can find that story in here. May have to dig it out while we're listening to the sound bites. But they went after groups simply for supporting the nation of Israel. I mean, that's how bad things got with this harassment program from the IRS. And this is very, very similar to what happened under Dick Nixon. In fact, we'll play the soundbite from George Will. One of the articles of impeachment against Dick Nixon was that the IRS had been used under him in his administration. Remember, he's the guy at the top. He's responsible for this. He creates the climate. And reality, the same thing is true here. Understand this. President Obama cannot escape responsibility for this in any way, shape, or form for one simple reason. The guy that's at the top of the pyramid, he sets the tone for everything that happens under his leadership. If you have somebody that's the president of an organization, that president is going to set the tone for what happens in that organization. He's going to create an atmosphere that provides the very environment, the atmosphere in which that organization operates. And what that means is people are only going to do things that they think are consistent with the values of the guy at the top. They're not going to deliberately go out there and do things that they think may upset or tweak the leader of that organization because they'll simply out of self-instinct and self-interest want to protect their jobs. So they'll be careful to do it. So the fact that you had the IRS going after these organizations as far back as 2010 means that they felt that they would have protection, they would have shelter, that what they were doing was perfectly consistent with the mindset of the president, that the president was not a guy who was going to have a problem with them using their tyrannical powers to punish, harass, persecute, place obstacles in the way of nonprofit organizations. Now, here is President Obama speaking about this morning. And remember, with the backstory I've just given you, there is no way to absolve him of culpability because those that were doing this were doing it in an atmosphere that he himself had created. He had set the tone in the things that he had said, in the things that his administration had done, in the things that his military had done to target evangelical groups. We've been over this before, but we've seen particularly how the military has listed evangelicals as the number one threat to domestic security. That Roman Catholicism is right there. Evangelical Christians, number one. Al-Qaeda number 4, Hamas number 5, Roman Catholics number 9 or 10. We're right on the same list with these Islamic terrorist groups. And you have this lieutenant colonel from Fort Campbell in Kentucky identifying FRC and AFA by name as domestic hate groups that have to be watched because they do not share Army values. Their values are inconsistent with the values of the Army. And, the idea there is that these are the un-American groups. These are the anti-American groups. So you've got this entire climate that President Obama himself is responsible for. He's created it. He's fostered it. He's set the standards by which people under him operate. So there's no way that he has any basis to slide on this, but this is exactly what he wants to do in this soundbite. Now remember, the way that President Obama has set himself up is it's always somebody else's fault. He's never culpable. Remember Jay Carney trying to slough all of this Benghazi talking points thing off on the intelligence community. Well, I would refer you to the intelligence community. We were just using the stuff that they wrote. We're just using the stuff that came from them. It's all their fault. It's the fault of the intelligence community. So it's always somebody else's fault. So listen to Obama try to slide off of this thing. Listen.
This is pretty straightforward. If, in fact, IRS personnel engaged in the kind of practices that have been reported on and were intentionally targeting conservative groups, then that's outrageous, and there's no place for it. The IG is conducting its investigation, and I am not going to comment on their specific findings prematurely, but I can tell you that if you've got the IRS operating in anything less than a neutral and nonpartisan way, then that is outrageous. It is contrary to our traditions, and people have to be held accountable, and it's got to be fixed.
So that's President Obama. It's all their fault. It's all the fault of the IRS. It's all the fault of rogue agencies out there that are off the reservation. But I've got a stack of stories here that indicate that this administration is culpable in these things going back some time. And by the way, I got to interrupt myself here. I owe an apology to Marissa from Houston, Texas. And she sent me a very sternly worded letter because I played a soundbite of Sheila Jackson Lee, who was her representative. I played a soundbite of her on Friday's program without warning my listening audience, without alerting my listening audience to what I was about to do. And she says to this, Mr. Brian Fisher, thanks to you, I must now have my vehicle detailed. In the future, please give us listeners here in Houston, Texas, plenty of warning before you play a clip of Sheila Jackson Lee. We are literally sick of her. So I played the Sheila Jackson Lee clip without warning. It caused Marissa to upchuck in her car, apparently, and therefore she's got to have it detailed, and she's not a happy camper. So at our next Share-a-thon, just want to give you a heads up, at the next Share-a-thon, maybe one of the premiums that we will offer will be an air sickness bag for the listening audience of Focal Point and AFR Talk that you can carry with you in your car. And then I will alert you when we are about to play a sound bite from Sheila Jackson Lee, because we care about our listeners. Marissa, we care about you. We don't want to do anything that would incur unnecessary expense, as you have to have your car detailed. So that'll be for the future. But anyway, I got a whole batch of stories here about the complicity of the IRS and the Obama administration. Here's that story. Let me see if I can grab that one first, about the targeting of this Jewish organization, two of them actually. And remember, we've often speculated about how President Obama's sympathies line up with the religion of Islam. There's an undercurrent of hostility toward Israel and toward evangelical Christianity. But here is the story from the Jewish press. There is evidence that the IRS also targeted pro-Israel groups. This is in addition to Tea Party groups, patriot groups, groups trying to educate people on the Constitution. There is evidence the IRS also targeted pro-Israel groups whose positions were potentially inconsistent with the administration. So in other words, it was purely political. They were trying to do some payback. So it's now the Internal Retaliation Service. IRS is Internal Retaliation Service. So here's the IRS under the Obama administration going after nonprofit organizations that are pro-Israel. Their sin, their crime against the Internal Retaliation Service is that they support Israel. They support Israel's right to exist. That put them on the Obama enemies list, and the IRS went after them. For example, in 2010, the passionately pro-Israel organization Z Street filed a lawsuit against the IRS, claiming it had been told by an IRS agent, this is 2010 now, that because the organization was connected to Israel, its application for tax-exempt status would receive additional scrutiny. Now notice what's going on here. Israel is our one reliable, consistent ally and friend in the Middle East. It's the only democracy in the entire Middle East. It's the only country in the Middle East that shares our same tradition and our history of values. We got the Ten Commandments from the Jewish people. The Jewish people preserved the Ten Commandments given by God to Moses. That has become the moral standard under which Western civilization has developed. So we are connected to Israel. They are our ally. They are our only true friend. And now the IRS going after this group, and their crime is that they are connected to Israel, quote, end quote. And said because of that connection, the application for tax-exempt status would receive additional scrutiny. In addition, the IRS agent told a Z Street representative that the applications of some of those Israel-related organizations have been assigned, quote, to a special unit in the D.C. office to determine whether the organization's activities, listen to this, contradict the administration's public policies. This is an IRS agent saying this. Your application for tax exemption is going to a special office because we suspect that your organization's activities may contradict the administration's public policies. So once again, the Obama administration has turned the IRS from a neutral tax collecting agency to the Internal Retaliation Service. Focal Point AFR Talk back in 2.